we took a break from SIG for a minute, but now we're
Back to
back
SIG.
again. Back again. All right. So,
Yay, the SIG stream.
dude, it's the SIG life at this point, bro. It's a hard SIG life
didn't
for
choose
me. The Vancouver Police Department. This is from Jeff Morey, the chief of police. This is a memorandum. I think I might have these out of order. So just this is the Officer Warner memo, and we'll go ahead and go through it. So on Wednesday, then August 9th, 2023 at approximately 3:45, I was at Safe Fire Indoor Shooting Range with the Vancouver Police Department Training Division. I was in Bay 3 at the 15-yard line, shooting next to Officer Hill when his P320 experienced a spontaneous discharge. Now, that is the first time I've heard it called a spontaneous discharge. So we have SDs, NDs, UDs, phones going off. Fantastic. I had completed my string of fire, holstered my firearm, and looked over my shoulder at Officer Hill. I noticed he had just holstered his firearm. I then looked back towards the targets when I heard a gunshot that sounded very close. I felt something hit my right leg, and a large amount of pressure hit both of my legs. I immediately looked around as I thought somebody threw something at me. I noticed internal components of a holster on the ground with a projectile impact on the concrete. Very lucky that he didn't get shot. Officer Hill identified that his firearm had discharged on its own while holstered. I was not injured and relayed my statement to the range cadre. This completed my involvement in the matter. So this is just eyewitness testimony from somebody there claiming that the gun was holstered when it went off, blew the holster around the room, and fortunately no one was injured. Now we also have the statement from the officer who was actually did the shooting, right? Or his gun did the shooting. Good afternoon, sir. On 8/09/23, I attended a firearms training at Safe Fire Indoor Shooting Range at approximately 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I had finished my course of fire and holstered my department-issued firearm, Sig Sauer P320. When I holstered my firearm, I fully seated my firearm with the unmodified department-issued Safariland holster. Now, according to SIG, the Safariland holster is the problem. Safariland has been known for getting guns to go off since their inception. That's what Safariland is famous for. That's why they have all the contracts. Is because they increase the lethality of your service weapon somewhat unintentionally. With an unmodified department-issued Safariland holster and did not feel any obstructions inside the holster. After holstering the firearm, I released the firearm from the right hand and separated my hand completely from the holster. I then placed my hand right back onto the holster by pressing the ALS safety hood back in position to fully secure the firearm inside the holster. When I pressed the ALS safety hood back into position, my firearm discharged into the holster. But essentially how it works is if you have an optic shroud, you have a little thing that you click back in place to fully cover it up. It shouldn't really touch the gun whatsoever, but in some cases it might touch the frame a little bit. So gun all the way in the holster, goes to close the hood, probably bumps the gun a little bit, sends around into the concrete.
Shame we can't get a hold of this gun to see which...
Actually, we're going to get to that. We're going to get to that because we actually have the full list and the serial numbers of all of it. Right, so when I pressed the ALS safety back into position, my firearm discharged into the holster, causing the projectile of the casing to exit the bottom of the holster and strike the cement floor. At this point, Range Officer Charlie On came over to where I was standing and asked me what had occurred. After I explained to him what had occurred, Range Officer Charlie On instructed me to unholster the firearm and make it safe. I made the firearm safe by extracting the magazine from the magazine well and locking the slide back to the rear of the firearm. Once I made the firearm safe, Range Officer Charlie On instructed me to place the firearm back into the damaged holster. At that point, I holstered the firearm and exited the firing range. So that is an eyewitness account of what happened and a corroborating statement from the actual shooter. Now, the only discrepancies is this guy arrived at 4 o'clock and the other guy arrived at 3:30, but they're all saying the same thing. So the statements line up. Very fortunately, the Vancouver PD keeps a detailed record of all the incidents that they have with their P320. So we actually have the serial numbers and everything else linked with it. So this firearm which fired in the holster, it was purchased on the 29th of June, 2022, and it was issued to Sergeant Romiti on the 1st of July, 2022, and returned to the Armory on May 30th, 2023. It was then issued to Officer Hill on the 19th of July, 2023, and returned to the Armory on August 9th, 2023, after the weapon discharged in the holster. It was inspected on the 28th of March, 2023, and no deficiencies or issues were found during that inspection. The inspection was completed by Sig Sauer Certified Armory Troy Rollins. After the firearm discharged in the holster, Sig Sauer Certified Armorer Zachary Allred did an in-depth inspection of the firearm. During that inspection, a possible defect in the sear housing was located, which may have prevented the sear from returning fully to reset, allowing the striker to be held under spring tension to fire without application of the trigger. It was also noted that a second reset could be heard when dry firing the weapon. The first reset resulted in a dead trigger as it was not a completed reset. So this is a gun that is just over 1 year old from the date of purchase. It had 2 officers And after an inspection, after it had its first issue, they discovered an issue with the sear and the dead trigger, all sorts of new issues that we really haven't tested for, right? Because a lot of the LFD stuff and my own stuff has been about the takedown safety and some of the other issues possible in a P320, but there are a variety of possibilities that could go wrong inside of a P320, which is why it's kind of a dumpster fire of a design. So then they go to another firearm. This firearm was purchased on the 29th of June, 2022. This firearm was issued to CPL Pardue. CPL Pardue was having an issue where the firearm would not fire when the trigger was pulled to the rear. Yikes. He advised he could hold the trigger pinned to the rear, and then if he shook the weapon, it would then fire. Ooh. So you're getting trigger hang, basically. So that's very nice. Due to this, on the 30th of March, 2023, the sear housing assembly, which contained the sear housing, sear spring, ×2 safety lever and disconnector, which was purchased from Sig Sauer as a single item replaceable unit, and a new striker assembly were installed. This replacement was completed by Zachary Allred. CPL Pardue reported that he was still having the issue with the dead trigger shortly after his replacement was completed. This culminated in the weapon being taken out of service on the 1st of August, 2023, just 8 days before they have another 320 go off on its own. Fantastic, because again, these are two separate items. Then they have a third serial number. This firearm was purchased on the 16th of May, 2019, and then issued to Officer Hing on the 7th of October, 2019. Officer Hing was using this firearm with no issues until a training day where she began to have an issue where the weapon would not fire when the trigger was pulled to the rear. The weapon was returned to the Armory on the 21st of June, 2023. This weapon was last inspected on the 14th of September, 2022, and no deficiencies or issues were observed. So again, their officers having all sorts of fun issues with their firearms. Another firearm, and again, this is just with the Vancouver PD specifically, just one department. This firearm was purchased on the 16th of May, 2019. It was issued to now retired and previous Rangemaster John Janisk on the 23rd of July, 2019, and was returned to the Armory on the 16th of November, 2022. When the firearm was returned to the Armory, Sig Sauer certified Armory Zachary Allred, he's getting a lot of work, replaced the extractor, sear housing assembly, which contains the sear housing, sear spring ×2, safety lever and disconnector, and the striker assembly. The decision to replace the sear housing assembly and striker assembly was due to the high round count and usage of the firearm by the previous Rangemaster. It was then issued to Officer Brian McLemore on the 2nd of January, 2023. On the 10th of August, 2023, the firearm was found to have the same dead trigger issue reported by CPL Pardue and Officer Hing. Officer McLemore advised that the weapon started having this issue on his last training day. At a later date, Sig Sauer certified armor Zachary Allred was able to replicate this firearm in a dry fire condition. The function has the same serial number, as noted above, that we talked about previously, where the trigger would be pulled, but the firing pin would not go forward. However, if the slide was touched or the weapon shaken, you could hear the firing pin go forward on an empty chamber.
Yikes.
So you would put it away, dead trigger. You might not even notice it if it was on the last thing. Put it in your holster, little bit of shake, and then that firing pin just heads home.
That's it's concerning, especially. Well, I mean, like if a gun's going off because you shake it, that's already concerning. But they reference the high round count, and
on a couple of them, one of them is only a year old.
Yeah, no,
then,
I get that it wasn't all of them, but if it's an issue that is possibly associated with how high round count, then we'd only continue to see more of them as time goes on. And
correct.
I'm just thinking about like how absolutely shot out and abused the M9s were that were around for like 20 years, and now thinking that this could happen to a pistol that's exposed to the same thing is like, ooh.
Yeah.
A little
Silent Official says Shake Awake P320. Yeah. So this, I believe, Protraband, who is banned from making videos right now, he got a strike from Sig Sauer. He got a strike like a primer in a P320. So he will be uploading something next week. But he got all of these documents, and these are direct from the Vancouver PD. These are all internal memos done by Sig Sauer certified armorers, right? And they were able to recreate this issue in a dry fire environment, right? So these are live guns with the correct SIG parts, bought directly from SIG, the correct parts, right? And then in a dry fire environment, dead trigger, a little bit of wobble, firing pin goes forward, right? Which is kind of what we see in a lot of these circumstances, right? With Genghis Khan, gun is forward, sits in the holster, something moves, bumps, goes off, right? At a training class with AHT, done with the drill, gun in the holster, moving around, touching it, fumbling, whatever it might be, gun goes off on its own. The exact same thing that we talk about in the actual instance that happened at the safe fire training range with the Vancouver PD. There are multiple issues happening at the exact same time. Some of it might be incorrect parts, and some of it is also correct parts that just aren't functioning properly. And these are SIG parts, not aftermarket parts. These are installed by certified Sig Sauer armorers, and these are recreatable according to these documents, right? So I don't know what Sig's response to this is supposed to be. Nuh-uh. You're
No,
lying.
Uno reverse
I
card.
guess. How about no? So we will definitely, and this is part of an internal investigation. And to be clear, the Vancouver Police Department has actually switched to the Glock 47, which I think Ben Stager got a big check for that by selling the Glock 47 to everybody. But so that is the
Stager
new.
likes the 47.
Yeah, no, he loves the 47. I've shot his 47. It's fine, totally fine.
It's a Glock.
Yeah,
Give me a gun of all
okay.
kinds.
Honestly, maybe I'm not good enough to tell, but Ben's 47 with all of his different stuff on it felt exactly like my 17.